Hey everyone, I'm Liz, and today I'm going to show you how to make one of these Baby Yoshi amigurumis. Some things you'll need for this tutorial are a crochet hook. I'll be using a size E. You'll need some worsted or Aran weight yarn in white for the underbelly, pumpkin and bright yellow for the boots, and the color of your choice for the body. I'll be using spring green in this tutorial, but I've also made some using red, bubblegum pink, bright yellow, turquoise, and royal blue. All of these yarns are from Red Heart Super Saver. You'll also need a pair of scissors to cut your yarn, a yarn needle to sew in your ends, and if you want, you can use a stitch marker or a bobby pin to mark the first stitch of your row. You'll also need to make a pair of eyes for your doll. I'm going to use these white yarn eyes that I've made by tying a thick knot using 2 pieces of yarn at once. If you want to see how I made these yarn eyes, you can look in the description below for a link to that tutorial. And I'm going to use a piece of black yarn to sew on the black part of the eye. If you'd like to follow along, you can find the link to the written pattern in the description below, or click the link on the screen. I'm going to begin by making the underbelly of the doll, so I'm going to use white. First, I'm going to create a slip knot. Then I'm going to insert my hook, and chain 12. Then into the second chain from the hook, I'm going to half double crochet, and then I'm going to double crochet into the next 4 stitches. Alright, next I'm going to half double crochet into the next 2 stitches. And then single crochet into the next 3 stitches. And now I've only got one more chain in my row. Into that chain I'm going to single crochet 3 times. Okay, now I'm going to turn the work and continue working on the other side. And I'm going to repeat the same thing as on the other side mirrored. So I'm going to single crochet into the next 3 stitches, then half double crochet the next 2 stitches, then double crochet into the next 4 stitches. Next, half double crochet into the next stitch. And then slip stitch into the last chain on this side. Okay, now I've finished doing the underbelly. Now I'm going to create the lower jaw here just at the top of the underbelly. First I'm going to chain 2, and that'll count as the first stitch of my lower jaw row. Then I'm going to double crochet 6 more times into the same stitch I chained from. Alright, I've finished my 6 double crochets. Now I'm going to chain across to connect the 2 corners of the jaw. So I'm going to chain 2. Then slip stitch into the chain 2 that counted as the first stitch of the row. Then I'm going to cut off my yarn. And that's so that the jaw has a slight curve to it. And now I've completed the white portion of the body. Now I'm going to create the body and head of my doll. So I'm going to take my spring green yarn, and you could use any color you like for the body. I'm going to pull up a loop into the left corner of the lower jaw. That'll be the chain 2 that counted as the first stitch, using my spring green yarn. And I'm going to chain 1, and that's going to count as the first stitch of the row. So I'm going to mark that stitch with my stitch marker. And I'm going to continue into the next 2 stitches of the lower jaw with single crochets. And then I'm going to increase the next 2 stitches at the middle of the jaw. To do that, I'm going to single crochet twice into the same stitch. And I'm going to increase again into the next stitch. And then single crochet into the next 2 stitches. Then I'm going to go into this last stitch on this side, and I'm going to increase that stitch so that I can turn the work and start working along the side. Alright, I've done my increase, and now I'm going to turn the work and single crochet 1 into the side of the stitch. And then I'm just going to continue to single crochet into the stitches around the tail of the doll. So I'm going to continue to single crochet until I get back to the beginning of the row. Alright, I've gotten to the end of my row, and I've single crocheted all around the tail. Now I'm going to single crochet until I reach the middle of the face, where I'm going to do one more increase just to widen the nose a little more. Alright, I've reached the middle. Now I'm going to increase one. And then I'm going to continue to single crochet until I get to the middle 2 stitches of the tail at the back of the work. Alright, I've reached the middle. Now I'm going to decrease those 2 middle stitches together and narrow the back of the work. So to decrease, I'm going to insert my hook through the next 2 stitches. Pull up a loop through both of those stitches. Then single crochet to decrease. Alright, now I'm going to continue to single crochet until I get to the end of the row. Alright, I finished this row. Now I'm going to continue to single crochet until I get to the back of the work, but this time I'm going to decrease 6 times at the back of the work. So I'm going to single crochet until I get to the middle 12 stitches at the back. Alright, I've reached the back and there are 6 more stitches left on this side. Now I'm going to do 3 decreases on this side into these 6 stitches. And then I'm going to decrease 3 more times on the other side of the tail into these 6 stitches. Alright, I've finished with my last decrease of the row. Now I'm going to continue to single crochet until I finish the row. So I've reached the end of my row. Now in this next row, I'm going to decrease the beginning of the row to finish up the nose. So I'm going to decrease 6 times into these 12 stitches at the beginning of the row. Alright, now I'm going to single crochet again until I reach the middle 12 stitches at the tail so I can decrease another 6 times. Alright, now I'm going to do my decreases at the back of the tail. And then I'm going to single crochet until I get to the end of the row. Alright, I've reached the end of my row. Now before I continue, I'm going to add a bit of fiber fill to the body and the nose. Okay, I'm done adding my fiber fill. Now I'm going to continue to single crochet until I reach the middle 12 stitches at the back of the work again, so I can do another 6 decreases. Alright, I've finished with 6 more decreases. Now I'm at the end of the row, and all the stitches at the back have been decreased. So now I'm going to single crochet around the front to continue the head, but I'm going to skip about half the row once I get to the back, so that I can stop working the back and continue working the front. So I'm going to single crochet into the first 7 stitches of the row. And then I'm going to skip the last stitches of the row here, and I'm going to single crochet into the first stitch again to end the row. Alright, now I'm just going to skip these last stitches, and I'm going to single crochet back into that first stitch of the row. Alright, I've done the first stitch of this row. Now I'm just going to do one more row around the head, and then I'm going to end this part. Alright, I've reached the end of the row. Now I'm going to slip stitch into the first stitch of the row. And I'm going to cut off a long tail of my yarn, and I'm going to use that tail to sew closed the back of the neck and the top of the head later. Next I'm going to add the eyes. I've made these white yarn eyes. You can find the link to my tutorial for how to make yarn eyes in the description below. So I'm going to use my yarn needle to sew the eyes in place using the tails. Next I'm going to take a scrap of black yarn, you can use thread if you want, and I'm going to sew a pupil onto each of the eyes. Then I'm going to sew in the tails. Alright, both pupils are now done. I need to use the long tail that I cut to sew the neck and the head closed, but first I'm going to add a little bit more fiber fill. Alright, now I'm going to sew the body closed. Alright, I've sewn the body closed. Now I'm going to add eyelids using the rest of the tail. Next, I'm going to make the arms and legs. These are made pretty much the same way, except with the arms I'm going to start with a chain of 5, and for the legs I'll start with a chain of 4. So I'm going to pull up a loop using my green yarn at about the place where I want the arms to go, which will be about here. And then I'm going to chain 5. Okay, then I'm going to single crochet into the third chain from the hook. And then single crochet into the next 2 chains. And then to finish this arm, I'm going to slip stitch to the spot where I started. Cut off my yarn, and sew in my end. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side to create a second arm. And then I'm going to do the same thing to make up the legs. I'm going to pull up a loop at the spot where I want the legs to go. And I'm going to chain 4. Then single crochet into the third chain from the hook. And single crochet one more time into the last chain. And slip stitch to the same spot where the chain began. Cut off my yarn, and sew in my end. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side to create another leg. The reason I've made the legs so much shorter than the arms is because I still need to make the boots. So I'm going to use orange and pull up a loop at the bottom corner of one of the legs I just made. It doesn't matter which one it is because I'll be making the boots the same way on both sides. Then I'm going to chain 1, and that's going to count as the first stitch of the row. Then I'm going to single crochet again into the same stitch to increase this stitch. And I'm going to increase the next stitch as well, so I'm going to single crochet twice into the same stitch to increase. Now I'm going to turn the work so that I'm working on the opposite side of the leg, and I'm going to single crochet into the next stitch down on both sides from the stitches I already worked into. So just into these loops here. Pull up a loop, and single crochet. Now I have 5 stitches total. So I'm going to find that chain that counted as the first stitch of the row, and I'm going to single crochet into that stitch to start the next row. Now in this row I'm going to do 2 increases into the stitches at the middle front of the boot. So that would be these 2 stitches here. So I'm going to single crochet until I reach the front middle of the boot. Then I'm going to single crochet 2 times into each of those 2 stitches to increase the toe of the boot. And now that I've finished with my increases for this row, I'm going to continue to single crochet. Then I'm going to do another row of the same thing. I'm going to increase the 2 stitches at the middle front of the boot to increase the toe of the boot. Okay, I've finished my next row's increases. Now I'm going to single crochet until I reach the end of the row. Alright, I've reached the end of the row. Now I'm going to do a row of slip stitches into each stitch of the row. Alright, I've reached the end of the row. And now I'm going to slip stitch to the first stitch of the row. And then cut off my yarn and sew in the end. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side to make the other boot. Now to finish the boot, I need to make the sole of the boot using yellow yarn. So I'm going to pull up a loop into the back loop of one of the slip stitches at the bottom of the boot. And I'm going to do a row of slip stitches into the back loops of every stitch in this row. So I've gotten to the end of my row. I'm going to do one more row of slip stitches to lengthen the sole of the boot. So I'm going to once again slip stitch into the back loops of every stitch of the row. Alright, I've reached the end of my row. Now I'm going to slip stitch to the first stitch of the row and cut off a long tail of my yarn. And I'm going to use that tail to sew close the bottoms of the boots. I'm going to create long stitches straight across the bottom of the shoe using my yarn needle until I cover up the bottoms completely. Then I'm just going to sew in the end. Alright, now the boot is done on this side, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side to finish the other boot. And now all my Baby Yoshi dolls are complete. I hope you liked this tutorial. If you did, give it a like or share it on social media. If you want to see my Yoshi Easter eggs tutorial, click the link at the end of the video. And if you want to see more tutorials like this in the future, subscribe to my channel and I'll see you next time. Bye!